Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
So Geoffrey had a list and I had a list, and we put the list together and it was too big. So we have to do 2 of these.
Because my list is perfect. Welcome to episode 154 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 154. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and the lows, and the good and the bad and the up and the down. I know we're farther in the future, but happy late Mother's Day. We're recording this on Mother's Day. Happy late Mother's Day to the mothers out there. All right. Did you get to see the totality, any of it?
Yes.
We didn't get much of it down here.
That was really, really cool.
We didn't get to see much of it. I mean, it turned a little darker outside, but it was real overcast, so I really didn't get to see much. So I mean, to travel to the totality for me, it would have been 6 hours away, and I wasn't willing to travel 6 hours for 2 minutes.
Oh no, it was at work, and they were like, "All right, go outside, check it out." And I walked outside. I was like, "Good God, it's dark!" And then it was bright daylight, like 20 minutes later.
No, not us. It was overcast the whole day. So,
but it did cool. It cooled off.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was kind of warm beforehand, and then it got really cool, and it stayed cooled off. So that was cool.
Yeah, we were cool for a couple of days, so it wasn't bad. I finally finished Fallout. Finally, loved the Fallout TV series.
Oh my God, it was beautiful.
Absolutely loved it. I hated that there were no death claws in it except for a skull. or synths, but kind of makes sense because the synths were all from the Institute, which is the East, versus this was in the West, so that kind of makes sense. But I really would have liked to have synths in there too. But I thought they did just an outstanding job with that show. I can't wait for the second season. I hope we don't have to wait years for it, but we probably will. And it's pushed Bethesda. They were planning Fallout 5 for after Elder Scrolls, which was going to mean possibly 2027 or 2028 for the Fallout 5, but because of the popularity of the TV show, they're thinking about farming it out to another studio now and bringing Fallout 5 out quicker. Well, they would oversee it.
Okay,
they would oversee it. Just they don't have the resources within because they've promised Elder Scrolls, and that's what they're working on.
And Elder Scrolls is pretty popular, so
yeah. And apparently Fallout 76 is still going pretty strong. It's the TV show has helped out a lot. I didn't like 76, but I was in it at the very beginning. I've heard it's improved because it different from the other Fallouts. Fallout 76 is a massive multiplayer online role-playing game. So you've got other people that you can play in there with. But the funny thing about it is everything I'd heard that the PvP, player versus player, portion of Fallout has really kind of taken a back seat, that it's been very peaceful, people working with each other and not doing a whole lot of the PvP. But there's something, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was something that Microsoft recently did that pissed off a bunch of Fallout 76 players. And they found the settlement of one of the bigwigs at Microsoft, and everybody attacked it and destroyed it. In Fallout 76. So that just happened this week. So that was really, really funny. So interesting how Fallout, I mean, you've got all these people who've never played Fallout before, like, oh my God, this game's great. And they've got just huge
This
numbers.
game is awesome.
Yeah. Huge numbers. Fallout, all of them are great. But the definitely watch the TV show. Well worth the watch. It does make it better if you've played the games, because there's a lot of Easter eggs and callback to the games that help, but you don't have to be a player of the game to enjoy the series. It's good even without it. So much fun. I enjoyed it. Walt Goggins is phenomenal in that show. The last thing I had, I'm dealing with a small case of bursitis in my elbow. That's not fun. It hurts.
Oh, sorry, man.
That's all right. I'm on antibiotics and everything. It just my left elbow is kind of swollen and very warm. Got a little fever in it, but I think I'm starting to come out of it. It's just, I don't know how the hell I got bursitis in my elbow. It's very strange. But anyway, what you got going on?
Not a lot out here. I did check out the new Doctor Who that just came out again because it's Mother's Day. 2 episodes. They were incredible. Loving Ncuti Gatwa. I'll
have to check those out. Are they on Max?
No, they're on Disney.
Oh, that's right. It moved to Disney. Okay, yeah. Great.
Not only did it move to Disney, but they changed, like, it's like season 1 now on Disney, which is weird. But it's Doctor Who. I mean, the canon's still right. Russell T. Davies is great. They released 2 episodes. One of them, they wanted to go back and listen to the Beatles record their album. Mm-hmm. But, of course, shenanigans happened. And the Beatles are in the studio recording with George Martin, and they're terrible. And that's when they realize something has gone wrong.
Interesting.
God. I mean, the song is hysterical. It's "I love my dog. My dog is great. Yay, my dog." Oh my God. I was laughing so hard I had to stop, but I'm kind of a music head, so. But yeah, it was really it was a lot of fun. Love those. So if you guys aren't checking it out, check it out.
Yeah, I didn't
2
know.
episodes out now.
I didn't know that it had dropped. I'm pulling up Disney Plus just to look. Am I signed in? Yeah, I'm signed
Space
in.
Babies and what was the second one? Space Babies was pretty good, but
Doctor
I mean the second
Who.
one was much better.
So the Church on Ruby Road, that was the one that came out at Christmas.
Yes.
And then Space Babies and the Devil's Cord.
The Devil's Cord, yeah.
The Devil's Cord looks to be the one with the Beatles.
Yes. And they look nothing like the Beatles. But the guy playing George Martin looks exactly like George Martin. So that's
pretty
nice.
Cool. When's the rest of the
I think they're going to drop Saturday night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Saturday night. I think we got it about 7 o'clock. No, we got it Friday night. Sorry. Because we got it. I was able to watch both of those and Joe Bob Briggs, because Joe Bob Briggs is releasing an episode with just one movie every 2 weeks, and that's amazing as well.
So there's going to be 8 episodes total, and yeah, it looks like it's going to drop every Saturday. Well, it's got a release date for episode 4 and 5, but then 6, 7, and 8 just say 2024. So I don't know if it's going to be June or what. It doesn't really say. Yeah, the next one will drop next Saturday. Good. We'll have to get those. I'd actually like for them to go all the way out, and then we can watch that as a whole.
Kind of binge them.
Yeah. Same thing we're doing with the Rookie right now, waiting on the Rookie to drop all their episodes. I think they've only got 8 episodes out right now.
Yeah,
for this current season.
For some reason, they're releasing the Rookie. They'll release a couple of episodes, and there'll be a couple of weeks, and they'll release a couple more episodes.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why they've been doing it. They've all been really good. We've been watching it live.
That's interesting. I wonder why they're doing that. I hope that's not a boon for the show.
No idea.
Huh. So this is so funny. It's just another clue that they're watching us. Everybody is watching us. They know what you're doing. They know what you're saying. We hardly ever watch live TV anymore.
Yeah.
The only thing I watch live TV for is football.
Okay.
And Chelsea was like, we should really cancel YouTube TV, and then you can pick it back up during football season. I said, yeah, that's a good idea, because we don't watch it. And so I go into my settings for YouTube TV, and I go to and I go to cancel my subscription, and then a message comes up on the screen that says, "Are you wanting to pause your membership until football season?" So my membership is paused until August, when it will come back up again.
That's smart.
That's just funny that they knew exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
it's like, oh, football season's over. He's shutting it off. Would you just like to pause it? Yes.
Yeah. Please. Yeah, and that's a pretty cool feature that I can pause my monthly subscription, because we're not using it. We don't watch live TV. It just ever. After a few months into COVID, I stopped watching the morning news. I just got tired of watching the news, and I haven't picked back up into it. I get my news on the internet, and that's where I see things. So live TV is just not my thing no more. So anyway, with that, then I'll let you take over on the nerdery side of the house.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about Acid House, and we're actually going to have 2 episodes for this one, because we couldn't cram it all into one. Acid House, also simply known as just Acid, is a subgenre of house music developed around the mid-1980s by DJs from Chicago. The style is defined primarily by the squelching sounds and bass lines of the Roland TB-303, electronic bass synthesizer sequencer, an innovation attributed to Chicago artists Future and Sleazy D around 1986. Acid house soon became popular in the United Kingdom and continental Europe, mostly, I would say, Belgium, right? Isn't that right? Usually like Belgium, France, the Netherlands.
Correct.
Where it was played by DJs in the acid house and later rave scenes. But by the late 1980s, acid house had moved into the British mainstream, where it had some influences on pop and dance styles. Acid house brought house music to a worldwide audience. The influence of acid house can be heard in later styles of dance music, including trance, hardcore, jingle, big beat, techno, and trip hop. Acid house's minimalist sound combined house music's ubiquitous programming 4 on the floor beat, which is a 4/4 time, with electronic squelch sound produced by the Roland TB-303 electronic synthesizer sequencer. The sound is commonly produced by raising the filter resonance and lowering the cutoff frequency of the synthesizer, along with programming the 303's accent, slide, and octave parameters to create a variation in otherwise simple bass patterns. Exploration of texture is preferred over melody. A refusal of the metaphysical priorities of the Western music discourse. Other elements such as synthetic strings and stabs were usually minimal. Sometimes tracks were instrumental, such as Future's acid tracks, which we have on our list, or contained full vocal performances, such as Pierre Fantasy Club, Fantasy Girl, while others were essentially instrumental, complemented by the odd spoken word drop in, such as Future's Slam. I would also say another big one, at least in the music scene, was and it was all acid house. There was a classical house record. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Where they took a bunch of classical music and remixed them as house music. It was right at the beginning of the acid house thing. There is a Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and Beethoven's Ode to Joy. You would hear them in dance clubs. Beethoven was born in 1804. You kind of remember that.
That Ode to Joy was great.
Oh my God, they just get down on it, and they were awesome. Everybody I knew had this. But before the term acid house was introduced, raw earlier acid house was called high NRG or high energy, a type of baseline driven electronic music that began with disco music that discarded its funk elements, starting with Giorgio Moroder, who did productions for Donna Summer. However, the earliest recorded examples of acid house are a matter of debate. A lot of people say it was Sleazy D's I've Lost Control in 1986, because it was the first to be released on vinyl, but it is impossible to know which track was created first. In the 21st century, attention was drawn to Sharon Tej Singh's album Synthesizing 10 Rags to Disco Beat, featuring Indian ragas fused with disco. The album released as early as 1982, and it featured the TB-303 prominently. Singh being one of the earliest musicians to use it on a commercial release. The record predates the famously known acid tracks by 5 years. It was initially a commercial failure in India and eventually forgotten. Following its rediscovery and eventual re-release in early 2010, some music journalists compared the music to that of acid house music, even suggesting it might be the first example of the style. The first acid house records were produced in Chicago, Illinois. Future, a group founded by Nathan DJ Pierre Jones, Earl Spanky Smith Jr., and Herb J. Jackson, is credited with having been the first to use the TB-303 in house music. Alexander Robotnik in 1983, the group's 12-minute acid tracks was recorded to tape and was played by DJ Ron Hardy at the Music Box, where Hardy was the resident DJ. Hardy once played it 4 times over the course of an evening until the crowd responded favorably. Chicago's house music scene suffered a crackdown on parties and eventually and events by the police. Sales of house records dwindled, and by 1988, the genre was selling less than a tenth as many records as it had at the heights of the style's popularity, which was 1987, so just about a year.
Mm-hmm.
However, house and especially acid house were beginning to experience a surge of popularity in Britain. Okay, the reason, since this real underground thing in Chicago, And then it makes its way back to England. A lot of people are like, well, how? Because the records weren't necessarily being imported into England. It's because of New Order. They came over here to record some stuff. Again, this is a Tony Wilson story. And they're in Chicago to record something, and they show up in a van. Their van gets broken into, and all of their instruments get stolen. So Tony Wilson's like, okay, this is great. I'll buy you guys all new instruments. Why don't you guys go hang out at the club? They go in, and Future is playing. Or Tony J is playing. And they hear this stuff. This stuff all gets put on the next New Order album. This is about 1986. So they do, and of course they've been experimenting with electronics already. But in that 1986 album that they released, Bizarre Love Triangle and True Faith were both on that album.
But those aren't acid house songs.
No, they're not. But they did the release party at the factory.
Okay. Right.
And they brought some of these Chicago guys with them.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I'm with you.
That's when it exploded in England.
Yeah, because I mean, you had brought up electronica, and for our listeners, as you're diving into this, acid house and electronica are very different.
They are very different, even though they use the same instruments.
Similar, but they are very different genres of music.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do confuse them. I understand, but they are very, very different.
Yeah, I originally had 808 State in the list, and I had to take them out.
Yep. Nope.
Because they're electronica.
Correct.
But they name themselves after the Lynn 808 drum machine, which is used a lot by acid house in conjunction with that Roland 303.
Yeah, the Roland 303 is very key in all that music.
Yeah, and that Lynn 808 drum machine, they use it a lot. Run it through that Roland 303, and then a couple of mixing tables. You could party all night. You don't even need that many records. And they used, a lot of these guys would sample off of New Order's electronic stuff too, so it kind of goes into it. But again, New Order wasn't doing acid house; they just liked it. It takes a weird turn at this point. They have this thing called the Second Summer of Love. It was a late 80s social phenomenon in the United Kingdom, which saw the rise of acid house music and unlicensed rave parties. Although primarily referring to the summer of 1988, it lasted well into the summer of 1989, when electronic dance music and the prevalence of the drug MDMA fueled an explosion in youth culture, culminating in mass free parties and the era of the rave. The music of this era fused dance beats with a psychedelic 1960 flavor, and the dance culture drew parallels with hedonism and the freedom of the 1967 Summer of Love in San Francisco. The smiley logo is synonymous with this period in the UK. So what was weird is you got these house records playing. Of course, they're playing at the factory most nights, and then they have rock bands on the weekends. Well, some of these rock bands heard this and started mixing this sound into their rock shows. So you get rock guitars and this Roland 303 and the Lynn drum machine, as well as a live drummer, and it goes nuts. And these guys will jam out. Of course, they were taking a lot of MDMA or ecstasy. So they'd jam out. They'd start playing a song, and they'd play for like an hour, just one song. One of those songs was Loaded by Primal Scream. That's the first song we're going to talk about. Primal Scream is a Scottish band originally formed in 1982 in Glasgow by Bobby Gillespie, formerly of the Jesus and Mary chain, and Jim Beatty. The band's current lineup consists of Gillespie, Andrew Ines, Simon Butler, and Darren Mooney. Barry Cadigan has toured and recorded with the band since 2006 as a replacement after the departure of guitarist Robert Throb Young. Primal Scream has been performing live from 1982 to 1984, but their career did not take off until Gillespie left his position as a drummer of the Jesus and Mary chain. The band were a key part of the mid-1980s indie pop scene, but eventually moved away from that jangly sound, taking on a more psychedelic and garage rock influences, before incorporating a dance music element to their sound with their 1991 album Screamadelica, which broke them into mainstream success. The band have continued to explore different styles on subsequent albums, experimenting with blues, trip-hop, and industrial rock, with the most recent album, Shamasmosis.
Sure.
Yeah, was released on 18th of March 2016. So we're going to talk about Loaded. So they heard all this acid house. They mixed in guitar rock, and they also mixed in a bunch of audio from different B movies. We want to get laid. We want to get loaded. Lose your love. And then again, this song can play for 20 minutes. Just jamming. I love Loaded. This is like, when I think of acid house, this is the first song I think of. What do you think about Loaded?
Not me. And I looked up that title. I think that's Chaosmosis.
Chaosmosis?
I think that's Chaosmosis.
Yeah, Chaosmosis. Okay,
I'm not a big of a fan of Primal Scream, and some of that. You know, you've got the drummer from Jesus and Mary Chain, and I'm not big fans of them. This group went a little too industrial rock for me, which I don't like. I'm not a fan of industrial rock. So this one is not, to me, when I think acid rock, this is not who I think of. And we're going to get to who I think of when I first think of acid rock, because it was where I started into it, and that would be the Belgium club scene. That was the one song in our list that crossed over. Yeah. And there's lots of stuff for them. But yeah, Primal Scream's just not big for me.
Right on. Well, the next one is Josh Wink, Higher State of Consciousness. Joshua Winkleman, better known by his stage name Josh Wink, is an American electronic dance music DJ, label owner, producer, and remixer. He is a native of Philadelphia, a pioneering DJ in the American rave scene during the early 1990s. Wink was the most prominent exponent of the tribal forms of techno and house in the U.S. In 1995, he released several hits, including Don't Laugh as Winks, I'm Ready, which hit number one on the U.S. Hot Dance Club Party chart, and Higher State of Consciousness, which is the song we're talking about today, or next, which topped the dance charts in Europe. He has had many club hits such as How's Your Evening So Far, samples of Little Louise's French Kiss, and Super Freak Freak. He was also gained much attention for his remixes of Stabbing Westward, FC Kahuna, Paul Oakenfold, Moby, Towate, Ladytron, and Depeche Mode, among others. What do you think about Higher State of Consciousness by Josh Wink?
It's a really good song, and it's a good representation of acid house. I love the samples of French Kiss. French Kiss has been in my playlist for many, many years. I stole it off Napster and LimeWire way back when. Which French Kiss, I kind of waffled back and forth. Should French Kiss be in the list? Because it's kind of acid house, but kind of not. And I'm sorry, I'm tailing off on a whole other song. That is a really great song, and that's a long song. It just goes and goes and goes. Yeah. And I just love the way the song, the tempo just goes up and up and up and up and up before it finally releases. And if you listen to the song, you'll know why it releases at that point. It's a great song to listen to, but Higher State of Consciousness is really good. I think this is good representation of the music.
I would agree. And it is right down the lane acid house. This is what they're talking about. Again, I like the stuff with the guitars mixed in with it, but the electronic stuff that's purely electronic is phenomenal. The next song on our list is the one that we had a crossover. So how this went down, I had a list of 10. I said, hey, I'm doing acid house. Jeff's like, oh, I got something you need to put in. He had a list of 10 as well. We had one crossover. It's this, which is why we're doing 2 episodes, each with 9. The Lords of Acid, I Sit on Acid. Dirty Song. Lords of Acid is a Belgian-American electronic dance music group led by musician Praga Khan. They're best known for making songs with sexual lyrics and sexually explicit tracks such as their hit Pussy. Lords of Acid debuted with a new beat single, I Sit on Acid, in 1988, created by Praga Khan, Oliver Adams, and Jade For You. Their debut album, 1991's Lust, along with the additional singles Rough Sex and I Must Increase My Bust. Their second album, Voodoo You, featured industrial dance music that was followed by Our Little Secret and a B-side compilation titled Heaven is an Orgasm, and a remix album titled Expand Your Head in 1999. In 2000, they released more rock-influenced fourth album titled Far Stucker, and in 2003, after being in the business for 15 years, released the greatest hits album called Greatest Tits. Their fifth album, Deep Chills, was released on the 10th of April, 2012. Tracks on the album included Children of Acid, Paranormal Energy, and Zach Baggins, and Pop That Tushy with Alana Evans.
Really? Zach Baggins? Really?
Huh? Yeah.
Zach
Baggins.
You know who that is?
No, who's Zach Baggins?
He's the paranormal investigator. He's got a TV show. You
really?
Know him if you know him.
That's why they call it Paranormal Energy.
Yes, he's very famous. He's also way over the top.
Oh yeah,
way over the top. Check out an episode at I can't remember the name of his show off the top of my head right now. Is it Paranormal Investigation or something? I don't remember, but yeah, check it out.
Is he a chop?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. We've been referring to people as a chop for years.
How do you listen to And This Is Why We Drink and not know who Zach Baggins is?
Meh. Lords of Acid re-released their back catalog of albums through Metropolis Records as special remastered band editions. The albums featured bonus tracks selected from B-sides from singles and artwork designed by artist-producer Josie Lords. And they're still making music today. Damn it. Yes. Jade For You left in early or late 1999, and I don't think they've been as good since Jade For You left.
Yeah.
Their stuff is still pretty cool, but I Sit on Acid is an acid house song. Straight up.
This is the one that if I think of acid house, this is the very first song that comes to mind. It was my introduction into the Belgian club scene. That music. I had a cassette that this was on, along with a whole bunch of other stuff, which is how I really got into it. I don't even remember. I got the cassette from somebody. They said,
what was it, a mixtape?
No, it was a factory release tape. It's the word I'm looking for, an authentic release. But anyway, at the time, I had been really into several new age jazz artists, which is all very much not necessarily electronic, but instrumental and in keyboard and things like that. And I really liked some of that. And somebody said, you need to check out this. This is Belgium house music. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And this was one of the first songs I heard. This is the Lords of Acid are great. Their songs are very explicit and they're very, very, very sexually explicit, but they are a perfect representation of acid house, especially that Belgium's club scene.
Oh yeah. And again, they're also a band that doesn't shy away from mixing in guitar sounds. They do not mind doing it, and it's hard.
Right. Hard
stuff, but it's, oh my God, you can dance all night to it. It's great stuff. And if you go to look for this song, again, I've included one in in our playlist. There's probably 50 versions of this song out there. Basically, they all start out the same. but some will be 5 minutes, some will be 10 minutes, some will be 25 minutes long. Just amazing.
Right. All this music, it was meant to be able to dance all night to.
Yep.
All this.
All of it. Every single one of these. So yeah, there are several mixes to all of these. The next one is another one of those English bands. This song was actually very, very popular for a short window of time. It is Unbelievable by EMF. They were an English alternative rock band from Cinderford, Gloucestershire, who came to prominence at the beginning of the 1990s. I would say like right at 1990. During their initial 8-year run from 89 to 97, the band released 3 studio albums before a hiatus. Their first single, Unbelievable, reached number 3 on the UK singles charts and was a number 1 hit on the US Billboard Hot 100. Their debut album, Schubert Dip, went to number 3 on the UK album charts. And in April of 2022, EMF released their first album of new material in 27 years, Go Go Sapiens. The name EMF is initials of Epsom Mad Funkers, a name taken from a fan club of the band New Order in 1989. That is officially the name of what EMF stands for. I had always heard it stands for ecstasy, motherfucker. No. Unbelievable actually samples the movie Ford Fairlane. Andrew Dice Clay is all through, or Andy Silverstein is all through this song. This song was huge. I love this one, and I love the breakdown in it. I love the way the guitars interlace with the electronics. In a way I had never heard before when I heard this, because it was EMF that helped me discover Primal Scream. This blew me away. And God, you can dance to this song.
You can, and it was played in clubs. I've always thought this song is more on the edge of acid house than actually being acid house. They're more electronica. Especially this song. They might have some others that are more typical to acid. I mean, when you compare them to Lords of Acid, it's worlds different. This is acid house. But to me, they're just kind of on the edge of it.
Okay, that's fair.
I don't not like this song. I just think they're only kind of on the edge of acid house.
Right on. The next song is Bam Bam, Where's Your Child? Chris Bam Bam Westbrook is an American producer, singer, songwriter, arranger, music performer, remixer, recording studio engineer, and is sole owner of Westbrook Records. He owns the rights to all of his releases, which he controls through his publishing company, Last Dance Music. He is largely an exponent of house music, techno, and acid. And the name of the song is Where's Your Child from Bam Bam. This is one of those Chicago guys, and it was really, really early. Like 87, 88? Isn't that where?
Mm-hmm.
That about right?
Right.
It may have even been late 86 when he recorded it.
That's about right.
Yeah. Let's talk about Bam Bam, Where's Your Child? What do you think about this one?
Well, this is another one. As you said, it is very early in the acid house, and it was Chicago. It's not going to be as representative as a little bit later, but it was definitely one part of the beginning. It was definitely part of what led into this movement, and I think it's a really important one to put in this list. Definitely acid house. One of the pioneer songs, if I can say it that way, as part of that scene in Chicago, and 100% belongs in this list.
Yeah. You've got some others in this list too that I didn't even think about when I was first putting it together. Because again, when I think of acid house, I think of the second summer of love in 1989.
Oh no, that doesn't cover it.
Yeah. The next one is also a Belgian. A Belgian band, a little more electronica, but still kind of acid, especially this track. It is Headhunter by Front 242. Front 242 is a Belgian electronic music group that came into prominence during the 1980s, pioneering the style they called electronic body music. Their profound influence on the electronic and industrial music genres. Front 242 was formed in 1981 by Aarschot near Leuven, Belgium. Okay. By Daniel Bresnuti and Dirk Bergen, who wanted to create music and graphic design using emerging electronic tools. Prior to forming Front 242, Bresnuti worked on a music project called Prothese, and they were already producing several one-off tracks. The front part of the name comes from the idea of an organized popular uprising and the fact that a word can be translated in many languages while retaining the same meaning. The number 242 could have been chosen in tribute to the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, which formally established the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war and the need to work for just and lasting peace in which every state can live in securely. The first single by the duo Principles and the B-side Body to Body was released in 1981. This is from a little later in the 80s, I'd say about 1987. It is Headhunter by Front 242. Again, mixing that guitar sound. It is recorded electronically, so they're not actually playing guitars. They're playing guitars, recording them into synthesizers and throwing them out later on. But this is wow. This one's hardcore. You can tell where industrial kind of starts with these guys.
And this is another one with this group because they do dip in the industrial, which I said I'm not as big of a fan.
All their later stuff after this is definitely industrial.
I think Front 242 is very definitively cross electronica and acid house. I think they get lumped more into acid house simply because they were a Belgian group and they were played in the clubs in Belgium. I think they're a good one to have in the list. Not one of my favorites, but they do have some good stuff and they have some good sound. But I think they're kind of a cross. I think they're kind of a cross. They just, like I said, they get acid more than anything else because they were big in the Belgium scene.
Because they were there at the time.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with that. To me, they sound a little more industrial, but there's something there that's, again, I think it's the guitars. The next one is Future Acid Tracks. And I'm with you on this. I don't care about the sing guy. I'm sorry. I listened to that after I had been reading some of these notes. The first acid house song is this one. Yep. It is Acid Tracks by Future. They're an American house music group from Chicago, founded in 1985 by Spanky Smith Jr., DJ Pierre, and Herb J. Jackson. The group is famous for inventing and defining the sound of acid house, a subgenre of house music, with their 1987 release, Acid Tracks. All the notes say it is seminal. It's considered to be the first acid house recording and credited for inventing and defining the genre. It is a 12-minute instrumental composition, was released on Trax Records in 1987. Originally, it was recorded to tape and played by DJ Ron Hardy at the Chicago nightclub Music Box. And as we said before, he played it 4 times in one evening. I can't say Ron Hardy played this the night that New Order was at the Music Box, and it's the reason why it moved to England. The track also utilizes a Roland TR-707 and a Roland TR-727, which are drum machines. What do you think about this one?
So this is going to be one, if you really want to get into acid house music, this is going to be one you're going to be on one side or the other. This was the beginning.
Yep. Was
not as finely tuned as you're going to find in the later 80s. This 100% has to be in the list because this is, people call this the seminal one, and they say it's the first. I think you should listen to this one just to kind of see where things start and then listen to where they go.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be people on both sides of the house. There's people that are going to like the early stuff and not the later stuff because the later stuff gets real hardcore.
Yes.
and the earlier stuff is very much experimental into this type of music. This is a good one to listen to. I'm more of a fan of the later. Like I said, when we get to Belgium, that's going to be where I'm picking up, and that's going to be your 87, 88 in that area, maybe as early as 86. But definitely listen to this one, because you really get a good feel for where this music began.
Yeah. And
I'm just not as big of a fan of the Chicago one. I said, Belgium is where I'm at.
Belgium's where you're at. But I have to say, Acid Tracks it's Acid House.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, there's no question.
They're not on one side or the other. This is
no,
right down the middle.
Definitely. I'm just saying you will see a definitive difference between that one and the Belgian.
There's no guitars in this either.
Right.
Which is unusual. The next one is by Maurice. This is Acid from 1988. Not a lot of information on Maurice Joshua. He was also connected a lot with Future. His name is Maurice Joshua. He is a Chicago-based DJ and producer, and he runs New Soul Records. And his song was "This Is Acid," released in 1988. It came out pretty shortly after Future's Acid Tracks, because Future's Acid Tracks came out in 87, but it was like late 87. This one came out in early 88, so they're real close together. These guys were also all working together, so it was amazing. What do you think about this one?
This is a good one. It belongs on the list for sure. Again, it's another one. It's how do I put this one? This one came out later in the Acid House, but it almost seems more towards the beginning, the way it is.
Yeah.
The way the music is set up, but it's and you kind of get some rapping in there as well, which to me is kind of out of place a little bit.
Yeah.
But
rapping doesn't belong. Spoken word kind of belongs in Acid House.
Right.
But not really hip hop. Not really.
No. And I guess that's kind of what it is for me. I put this in here because I think it's good representation. But I think it goes more to hip hop. I think it's very interesting they have congas and cowbells in this song, which is funny. But this song to me kind of starts leading into hip hop. I think this was kind of, to me, where that kind of spawns off a little bit more. So it's a good song to listen to. I don't think it's as representative as the later of Acid. I think this one sounds like it's more of the earlier.
Anybody out there familiar with the hip hop band Fusnickens? I believe out of Chicago as well. They may have been out of Philadelphia. You can kind of tell where they got, because they're real weird and kind of trippy. You could tell that this was an inspiration to them.
Yeah.
So if you like Fusnickens, you're going to like this.
Yeah.
Because it does. It kind of sounds like that. But yeah, I agree. It's kind of early days. And I would rather have spoken word than straight up rap.
Well, it sounds like it's early days. That's the thing, but it wasn't.
No. It came out after Acid Tracks.
Right.
Yeah, after Acid Tracks. But it was kind of early in 88.
Yeah.
The next one is Aha by Moby. Richard Melville Hall, born September 11th, 1965, known professionally as Moby, is an American musician, songwriter, singer, producer, and animal rights activist. He has sold 20 million records worldwide, and all music considers him to be among the most important dance music figures in the early 1980s. After taking up guitar and piano at the age of 9, he played in several underground punk rock bands throughout the 80s before turning to electronic dance music. In 1989, he moved to New York City and became a prolific figure as a DJ, producer, and remixer. His 1991 single, Go, was his mainstream breakthrough, especially in Europe, where it peaked with the top 10 of the charts in the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. Also Belgium. Between 1992 and 1997, he scored 8 top 10 hits on the Billboard Dance Club songs. Move, You Make Me Feel So Good, Feeling So Real, James Bond theme. Throughout the decade, he's also produced music under various pseudonyms.
One of my favorite James Bond themes, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His James Bond theme is really great. But we're going to talk today about Ah-Ah. It is Ah-Ah, not Aha, right?
Yeah,
it's Ah-Ah.
Yeah. It's Ah. Moby is another artist that crosses between electronica and acid.
Yeah.
This
you
one
can hear that punk rock in his stuff too.
Yes. This one is acid. This one is acid, but he will cross kind of back and forth. The James Bond one is more electronica.
Maybe even a Scotia industrial.
Yeah. But this particular song, or thinking of Moby, made me think of if you would like to see just a weird movie that is full of both electronica and acid, see The Cool World. It's a cross between cartoon and real life actors. It's got Brad Pitt in it. It's got Kim Basinger in it. Gabriel Byrne. Is that right? Gabriel Byrne.
Yep, Gabriel Byrne.
Usual Suspects. That guy.
Yeah.
Make Gabriel sure Byrne. I got the right guy.
Yeah.
See that movie because that has a really good. It's one of my. I love that soundtrack. It's got a great mix of electronica and acid house. And Moby reminds me of this. I think he's got a song on that album if I remember right.
The Cool World is a great flick. It's also an incredible soundtrack.
Yes, it's a very weird movie, but I love it. I've seen it so many times. But definitely listen to Moby, especially this song because it's so representative of the genre. Highly recommend.
Oh yeah. Well, that is it for the 9 for 154. We have another list coming up very, very soon for 155.
Awesome.
And we kind of mixed all of these together. I need to check out Spotify. I have them all on the Spotify playlist, but there are 2 separate lists for the YouTube playlist. So you guys should get out there and check them out. They're pretty fucking. And you can just pop them on and dance.
Awesome.
Because I tried to mix them a little with this and that, so you could listen to them at a dance party. Put them on for a party.
Yeah, it'll definitely work. Awesome. Appreciate that. Love the music. I've been a fan of it for many years. And most of the songs in that list. So great stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Well,
Can we pause?
Okay, so we had to take a quick pause. I think everybody caught that. Had to take care of some bio business. So sorry about that.
Bio business.
Hopefully everybody took that time to break themselves, even though for y'all it was 1 second. So
if that.
So with that, we will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
Today I got my information off Medium, Wikipedia, the Cult Education Institute, and ABC News. And this is the story of the murders of Dean and Tina Clouse.
Dean and Tina Clouse.
So on January 12th, I didn't know this one. This one came through one of the subscriptions I've got out there that gives me ideas of stories to cover. On January 12th, 1981, 2 bodies were discovered in Houston, Texas. The unidentified couple became known as the Harris County Does, as this was the county where they had been located. They were found in a woody, swampy area that had yet to be developed, which was just north of Houston city limits. And their identities remained unknown for decades, and their murders are still unsolved to this day. There was a local person who had let their dog run out in the woods because it was a fairly rural area at the time. And to their surprise, their dog returned with a decomposed human arm. As soon as this happened, they quickly contacted the authorities, and a search party was started to search the area, and they found the unidentified bodies near Wallaceville Road. Both bodies were discovered just a few feet from each other, and it was believed they had both been killed around the same time. Authorities began to investigate their deaths, and they determined that the couple had been murdered. The police found a bloody towel and a pair of gym shorts at the crime scene. Their cause of death was blunt force trauma. The male victim had been bound and beaten, and the female victim had been strangled. They believed that the woman had been attacked first and that the man had died trying to defend her, and both had been stripped of their clothing. Both victims had been heavily decomposed by the time they'd been discovered, and they determined that the couple had been there a few weeks to maybe about as long as 2 months. The male victim, was so heavily decomposed that part of his remains were skeletal. However, their faces had not decomposed excessively, and authorities were able to draw their faces in order to try and identify them. Harris County forensics artist Mary Mize drew both murder victims, who were believed to be teens or young adults, and the facial reconstruction images of both victims were released, but unfortunately no one recognized them. Again, they were not identified at the time of their discovery, and the case quickly grew cold. They had again become known as the Harris County Does, but were also known as Jane Doe 701 and John Doe 703. They were both buried in anonymous graves in the Harris County Cemetery, and this was a potter's field and was the resting place of a great deal of other unidentified bodies. For 41 years, the Harris County Does remained unidentified.
I'm not surprised they were decomposed. That's a lot of pine straw. For our non-Texas folks, Houston is in the middle of a pine forest. And when I say a pine forest, I mean a pine forest.
Yeah.
There's pine needles probably a foot deep in places, and they are very acidic. I'm sorry, please continue.
No, you're fine. Both victims were eventually exhumed for genetic testing, and they did that to determine if the victims were related. Harris County had recently received a grant from the National Institute of Justice to pay for multiple unidentified Jane and John Does and to have their DNA extracted and submitted databases. This was specifically for unidentified murder victims. Jennifer Love was put in charge of the exhumation, and she was the forensics anthropology director for the identification unit at the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office. In late 2020, the DNA samples were sent to a California-based company, Identifiers International, who specialized in genetic genealogy. They used the genetic database GEDmatch, and started to try to identify the couple. Misty Gillis worked on the male victim's DNA while Allison Peacock worked on identifying the woman. Gillis was able to identify or determine that the male victim had distant relatives in Kentucky who were the Clouse family. She discussed DNA is fascinating.
Yeah.
She discovered that the Clouse family had relatives who moved to Florida State, and she was able to use this information to track down someone who closely matched with the John Doe. In 2021, Peacock contacted the Clouse family and spoke to a woman named Debbie Brooks, and she asked the woman if anyone in her family had disappeared about 40 years ago, to which she confirmed she did have a missing relative. Debbie Brooks then provided Peacock with more information, and this led to the forensic genealogist positively identifying the Harris County Does. The deceased couple were identified as Tina and Dean Clouse. The woman who Peacock had spoken to had been Dean Clouse's sister. In total, it took the forensic genealogist 10 days to identify Dean Clouse, and shortly afterwards, his wife Tina was identified as well. On January 12, 2021, the Texas Attorney General's Cold Case Unit publicly identified the Clouses as the Harris County Does, and this date was the 40th anniversary of their bodies first being discovered.
Wow.
Dean's mother, Donna Casanta, had held on to the belief their son was still alive out there, so it was devastating for her to discover he'd been dead for decades. Following the announcement that revealed their identities to the public, members of the Lynn family and the Clouse family both traveled to Texas. They were able to get a firsthand look at the place where their loved ones had been found dead, and they were able to visit Tina and Dean's grave sites. Tina's brother, Les Lynn, stated that both families were in agreement that the Clouse couple should be buried together. So it was a great relief to finally have the Clouse couple be positively identified. However, once authorities finally knew who the Clouses were, they realized they had a problem on their hands. What happened to Tina and Dean's baby daughter?
What?
The Clouses had a baby daughter, Holly Marie, who had not been found anywhere near her parents' bodies, and no one knew where she was. There were no baby does that had been discovered that fitted her description. And when Debbie Brooks confronted Peacock and asked her if the investigators had ever managed to track down the baby, Peacock was taken aback. She responded simply with, "What baby?"
What baby?
So the authorities struggled to understand what had happened to the young baby because she would have been about a year old at the time. Had she been killed along with the parents, and was her body dragged away by scavenging animals? Had the police failed to find the baby at the crime scene because they'd been unaware that the baby had been disposed of in that area? So what could have happened to her? One of the main theories that was whoever murdered Dean and Tina had kidnapped their baby daughter. Allison Peacock and FHD Forensics worked with the Clouse and Lynn families, acting as the family's advocate, helping to try to find Holly Marie. Peacock had created a project titled Hope for Holly DNA Project to bring public awareness to the case. The Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, created an age-progressed image of what they believed Holly would look like, and this image was released to the public. The last place where Holly Marie had been seen was in Louisville, Texas, but decades had gone by with no sign of her.
Louisville?
Yep.
They're an awful long way from the north of Houston.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
We talk about that too. Yep.
Okay.
Multiple family members submitted DNA samples to various genealogy sites, hoping they would find her. There were multiple women who wrote to Allison Peacock and said they believed they might be Holly Marie Clouse. And many of these women were uncomfortable with going to the police, but they agreed to have Peacock test them. But once their DNA was tested, the women were ruled out. On June 7th, 2022, a year after her parents were formally identified, Holly Marie Clouse was found alive. She had been living in Cushing, Oklahoma, and the day that she found out about her deceased birth parents, she had been working at her diner job. Two detectives came in to talk to her. They explained that her parents had been murdered in 1981 and that she had been missing for more than 40 years. Holly Marie had no memory or knowledge of anything that had happened all those decades ago, and didn't even know she was a missing person or that her relatives had been searching for her, hoping that she was alive.
Holy crap. Yeah. Can you imagine that shock?
I know. Well, in 2022, when the police contacted her, she was 42 years old.
Yeah.
The date that she had been found, June 7th, was particular of interest because it was Dean Clouse's birthday. Interesting. The popular theory had been that Holly Marie had lived for decades without knowing who she really was. And when she was finally identified, the theory turned out to be correct. She had been thankfully not killed alongside of her parents, but she had never gotten to know the rest of her family, having been robbed of her own personal identity, and was raised by her adoptive family. There had been multiple groups that had been involved trying to locate her. The authorities had run into trouble finding her because her name was spelled Holly with a Y or Holly with IE in different forms. And Holly Marie's birth certificate had been sealed, and authorities were told that the only way to access her birth certificate was through a court order. They only knew of a few reasons why it would be sealed. It could be a juvenile record or if she had been adopted. Most of the details surrounding Holly Marie's life were not released to the public as she was a private person, but what was known is she had a good life with her new family. She'd been married for 20 years, had 5 children and 2 grandchildren. Certain details of her childhood were kept from the public because police were still investigating the double homicide. Police discovered that Holly had been left at an Arizona church not long after her parents had been murdered.
In Arizona?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You'll find out why.
All right.
Holly's adoptive parents were Philip McGoldrick and his wife from Yuma, Arizona. He was the pastor from the church where Holly Marie had been abandoned as a baby. Holly had been told she was adopted as a baby, but she never learned the truth of her birth parents, and this couple was never considered suspects.
No, they were just doing a good deed.
Mm-hmm. Philip explained to the detectives that one day 2 women showed up at the church. They had been part of a nomadic religious cult. There's your wanderers.
Okay.
And the women had been wearing white robes and were barefoot, and this had happened in late 1980. The unknown women wanted to leave the baby there, and one of the women claimed to be Holly's mother. They had given him Holly's birth certificate as well as a letter from Dean Clouse, which waived his parental rights. The church stated they were unaware of how these supposed cult members had ended up with the baby in their care, and he had been surprised by their request to take in the baby, but they were assured by the two women that they were serious about the request for the church to take the baby off their hands. The women also told Philip they had done this before. The women said they couldn't keep her because they were a nomadic group, and once they were done talking, the women left, and Philip never saw them again. So on the day Holly Marie discovered her true identity, she was able to meet with her family members over a Zoom call, and this occurred just hours after she talked to detectives. Her relatives were thrilled at the chance of talking to Holly, as they'd been holding on to hope they might one day be reunited with her. And in November of 2022, NCMEC helped fund a trip to Florida so she could meet her relatives in person. So the Hope for Holly project had completed its objective. It was renamed to the Dean and Tina Clouse Memorial Fund, and its new objective was to try to identify other unidentified Jane and John Does. The project became so popular that in October of 2022, it became Genealogy for Justice, which is a 501c3 charitable organization. The Clouse family and the Lynn family worked with Allison Peacock as advisors, and their first successful case was the positive identification of Virginia Higgins Ray, who had been a Jane Doe from Columbia, South Carolina in 1982, and she was identified on Mother's Day 2023. So a little background on Tina and Dean. Tina Gail Lynn was born on September 21st, 1963. At the time of her disappearance, she'd only been 17 years old. In 1978, Tina had met Dean in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and when she was 15, and Dean had been 19. Tina's brother was already dating Dean's sister, and the couple had later gotten married. Their family said it was a whirlwind romance. The young couple had got married on June 25th, 1979, when they were only 16 and 20, and their daughter was born on January 24th, 1980. They had been extremely invested in caring for their young daughter, and at first the couple had been living with Sherry Lynn, who was Tina's sister. So Harold Dean Clouse Jr. and Tina Lynn Clouse had moved from Volusia County, Florida to Lewisville, Texas in the summer of 1980 with their baby daughter, Holly Marie, which Lewisville, it's a suburb of Dallas. So just to give you an idea, Houston is very far from Dallas.
Yes.
The area had been
back then it was 5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's worse now. Drive.
That particular
we don't measure by distance. We measure by time
in Texas. Yes. That area had been developing extremely quickly at that point, with houses getting built all over the area. And there'd been a boom of new houses and developments cropping up, and people were eager to find work in the area. Dean had been a cabinet maker, and he got a job with D.R. Horton Home Builders. He had decided to move his family to Texas because he thought it would help him get a lot of work. And at first, the young couple lived with Dean's cousin. They did this because they wanted to save up money for their first house. But Dean quickly found that work was not as stable as he had hoped. The move to the new state could have been a good thing for the Clouse family. Had Dean gotten a high-paying job, they could have saved for their new house over time and lived comfortably in the new community, but this was not the case. By October 1980, which was just a few months after moving to Texas, the Clouse family refused to stay in contact with their family. The authorities believed that the Clouses were murdered between October 1980 to January 1981, and this is around the time the couple had cut off contact with their families. In that time frame, something had happened that had convinced the Clouses to further isolate themselves. They were last seen in Lewisville, Texas, which is the police are having a hard time to determine why their bodies had been found near Houston, because in miles, Lewisville is about 250 miles from Lewisville to Houston, about 250 miles. For months, Dean's mother, Donna, wondered what happened to her son. She hadn't heard anything from him. But in 1981, she finally decided to report Dean and Tina as missing persons. The police, however, were extremely reluctant to look in the couple because of the fact that the couple had cut off contact with their families and they were adults. They pointed out that the couple's car, though, had been returned to relatives in Florida. So the police just figured they just didn't want to be a part of their family anymore. In December of 1980, Dean's relatives in Florida were contacted by a woman called Sister Susan. She had told them she wanted to return Dean's car to them, and she would meet them at the Daytona racetrack in Florida. Dean and Tina, like I said, were not in contact with family at this point. It is possible that the family had already been killed at this point, because that's in that time range. The family did contact the police about their contact with Sister Susan, and although they knew of the meeting, the police chose not to attend the meeting. The family members met with Sister Susan along with a few other cult members at the racetrack, but they were left with even more questions than answers. The cult members insisted they could only meet at night. Sister Susan was the only one from the group who was allowed to speak, and the other people had to remain silent during the entire meeting. The relatives were told that Dean and Tina had joined their religious group and they didn't want to, quote, maintain worldly contact with their family members anymore. Donna, Dean's mother again, asked to speak to either Dean or Tina over the phone, and she wanted to hear from him because she was worried about him, but this request was denied. Sister Susan asked Donna to, quote, donate $1,000 to their cult in exchange for the vehicle back. So basically they were told, here, buy this vehicle back.
Mm-hmm. Buy a car that you already own.
Right. Well, the Dean owned, they didn't.
Yeah.
You know, and this was extremely odd. It made the relatives very suspicious of the motives. The news that the Clouse couple would have just rushed off to join a cult just didn't sit well with them. They thought it was highly unlikely. Dean and Tina's relatives believed the only reason why the couple's car had been returned to them was to keep off suspicion from the missing couple, so their family wouldn't contact police and have them look into it.
Say what kind of car it was?
Was it a Datsun? Oh, please. No, I thought it did, but it does not.
Okay, because a brand new car in the early '80s was like $3,500.
Yeah.
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 So they're wanting $1,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. The relatives did get back in touch with the police about the missing couple, but were told that because Sister Susan had told the family that Dean and Tina had joined the religious group, they must not actually be missing persons after all, and so they didn't put any effort into finding the couple. The Lynn family and the Clouse family started to work together to try to track down the couple on their own, but despite their efforts, they were unable to track them. They started to get in contact with various agencies, and the Lynn family went to the Salvation Army and told them about Tina and Dina. They knew that organization kept a federal database about missing people in all over the country, and they'd hoped to use this resource to try to track their loved ones. Unfortunately, though, nothing came of it. The police at one point began investigating the potential angle that the Clouses had been murdered by a Jesus freak nomadic religious cult. These type of cults were very common in the 70s. But they began to decline in the 80s. And Dean had some mild interest in these types of religious groups in his teen years, but by the time he had met Tina, he'd become less interested in them. It's possible that Dean had become interested in cults again once he moved to Texas and was away from his family. Who knows? Especially, they're down on their luck. They're not doing that great financially. And as we've talked about cults before, they lift you up and make you feel that you deserve better and you should be better. So, it could have been that he was just looking for a community of a sort in Louisville, since they hadn't set down their own roots yet, For decades, the identity of the nomadic religious group that had likely been responsible for the Clouse's death and also leaving Holly Marie at the church was unknown. The group was known to travel around all the southern states, and they believed in separating males and females. The group also believed in vegetarianism and refused to use any leather items. There had been a previous incident in which cult members had left a baby at a laundromat in the past. The identity of the cult group was finally revealed in 2023 as the Christ family. They were a nomadic group that had been founded by Charles Franklin McHugh, who went by the name Lightning Amen. He told his followers he was God's representative, common in a cult. The cult was supposedly based on the Bible. However, it was largely up to McHugh's interpretation. In the Christ family cult, men and women were kept separate and they had to stay celibate. The cult demanded extreme amounts of loyalty from their members, and one of the ways they did this was demand that their cult members abandon their children. They did this because they felt children didn't have any use in the nomadic group and they would only be slowed by them. They actually referred to children as excess baggage. Children, do require extra care and schooling, and parents would have to focus too much on attention on them instead of on the cult, and so the parents would abandon their children. The kids would often get dropped off in public places such as churches or laundromats so that someone else could take care of them. And cult members were also required to sell everything they owned and donate all the money to the cult. They were allowed to smoke pot and tobacco. However, they were banned from drinking alcohol. McHugh had been traveling around in the 60s, sleeping on park benches and dumpsters and dumpster diving for his next meal. And he had also spent 40 days in the Mojave Desert as he believed he was Jesus. As he started to accumulate followers, the Christ family would travel around Texas, Arizona, and California in the 70s and 80s. Rick Ross, who had worked for the FBI, spoke out about the previously unnamed cult, and he stated that judging from the description of the robe-clad women in bare feet, the unnamed cult that left off Holly Marie was most likely the Christ family. He stated, quote, there aren't any other groups that wore white robes and went around barefoot other than the Christ family, and locality would match as well, and the time frame also matches. Ross spoke out that he believed the Christ family was one of the most destructive cults in modern history. It has been suggested that Dean and Tina willingly gave up their baby daughter when they had been recruited by the cult, since this is what the cult demanded on them. The two women who showed up at the church did have a letter from Dean giving up his parental rights. But did he actually write the letter? Yeah. Or was it the cult members who wrote it themselves, pretending it was from Dean? And if the Clouse couple gave up their daughter, why were they murdered? A lot of it just doesn't make sense. The way they died, Tina was strangled and tied up and beaten for Dean. They both died very, very violent deaths.
Yeah.
McHugh had actually gained a reputation as a psychopathic cult leader. He would take the Bible teachings and twist them for his own purposes. The Christ family would have cult members completely cut off from their family, something very common again. And McHugh would heavily encourage his followers to use drugs since he did drugs himself. He was known to be very emotionally and psychologically abusive to his members. That's very common in cults. And he was extremely controlling of his cult members and was known to completely obliterate families. And he didn't seem to care who he hurt as long as he maintained a manipulative control of his followers. In 1987, he had gone on the run with some of his followers, which was short-lived because he was eventually brought up on drug charges. He was convicted of possession and transportation of meth, possession of a hypodermic needle, and possession of a concealed weapon, and got a 5-year sentence. And some of his followers were also brought up on drug charges. But then when he went to prison, the cult disbanded. That sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. There have been some cults out there that when their leader goes to prison, they stay with it. They'll even camp outside the prison. He did die in 2010, and a lot of his cult members are still active online and have joined various cult chats, but the cult is pretty much disbanded. Again, Tina and Dean's murders are still unsolved to this day. The investigation is still considered active, with some of the details being kept out of the media in case it affects the case. Now that they've been identified and Holly Marie was found alive, the police have been ramping up the investigation, trying to find out who murdered the Clouses decades ago. The killer might still be alive, and hopefully we can get justice in this case. And that's the story of the murders of Dean and Tina Clouse.
Well, thank you for that, sir. That was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought that was a really interesting case, and like I said, I had never heard of it. Like I'm going to hear from everything in Texas, but that was in the 80s. But yeah, I found it very interesting, especially the dive, the cross into a cult. So you got kind of a twofer with that one. You got a murder and you got a cult from me. So
nice. Well, and we were able to give some geography lessons about Texas that people probably weren't aware of, that don't live here.
Yes.
DFW, which is Dallas and Fort Worth, the Metroplex area, is about or in the early 80s, is about 5 hours to North Houston, because my aunt lived in my uncle still lives down in North Houston.
I think with the speed limits now, I think it's 4 hours.
Is it 4 hours?
I think so.
Well, but the traffic was less back then too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get on 45 and just zoom.
I think it's 5 hours from me. Might be 6 hours, but yeah, we measure distance and time in Texas.
In time, yeah.
You know, how long does it take to get somewhere? Not how far is it?
Yeah,
because the time is the distance for us.
Yeah, because I mean, it may only be 5 miles, but if it's 5 miles through downtown Dallas, that's 20 minutes.
Yeah,
5 miles from Weatherford to Azle, maybe like 10 minutes. Yeah,
right.
Because you're going 65 miles an hour, and there's nobody else on the road.
Right. Cool. Well, thank you for taking that trip with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
That'll take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find more information about us on nerderyandmurdery.com. I just realized today I have not updated the website. I am behind, and I apologize for that. By the time this episode comes out, it will be up to date.
Thanks, sir.
I need to get that done. But that is our hub where you can find everything. Most of the time, you'll find the links to our episode plus pictures about everything we talk about. Plus, you can find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yes. So in this case, you definitely want to go check the YouTube page out, because there's a lot of music and you can put it on and dance to it.
Awesome. You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing merchandise for that. The proceeds for that, plus our Patreon, our patrons that help donate to the show as well, all those proceeds go to the costs that are associated with the show. There are costs that keep us on the air to produce the show, the software to upload our shows and everything like that. So please do consider, our domain. Thank you. Our domain, our website, all that. There are costs associated. So please do consider either purchasing some merchandise or being a patron to donate with us. We do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information we talk about. So with that,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.